Well, hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab, where we get to have conversations that empower healthy churches. We love getting to do that. I am one of your hosts, Scott. This is your other host, Casey. Hello, Casey. How are you?
I'm good. Like back in the swing of things. The kids went back to school.
I
It's New
know.
Year's, by the way. Like, obviously, if you're listening
Yeah.
to this in the future, but like,
Yeah, you might be
screw-
listening to this at some other time, but for us, we're just into 2024, excited for it. Now,
yeah.
Casey, do you do like resolutions or anything? Or when people don't do resolutions, but they just call them goals, which is a
Yeah,
resolution with a different name?
funny you mentioned that. Yesterday at church, our team was having what we call, Devo, and there's like one question, and we're talking about it's the same thing, but not your resolution, but how will you spend this year's amount of heartbeats you have? We have
Ooh,
a finite number of heartbeats, so how will
yeah,
you spend your heartbeats this year? So, yeah, mine
that's cool.
mine are secret. I can't share them with you,
No,
but I have
it's cool.
a very long list of better ways I'm going to utilize my heartbeats this year.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'll share a friend of mine is turning 40 this summer. So, I think early July. And so he was like, I'm doing fit by 40. So he's like, got 40, the age 40 coming up. And he's like, I'm going to be fit by then. And so some of us in our kind of friend group are like, all right, let's jump on board. We'll all do it together.
You're doing
So
like 75 hard and all that stuff. Whole Foods.
sort of, not that intense. Yeah, it's gonna be like 6 degrees here in the Chicago area next week. So
Ooh,
I'm not getting that outdoor workout in, but we'll
step it
we'll
up,
go
dude.
for it.
6
Yeah,
degrees. Come
I know.
on.
Well, we're super excited for a conversation today with Ron Baker. Speaking of cold, he's up in Canada, so he can relate.
Yeah, got no room to
But
talk.
yeah. Ron's been pastoring for 30 years, tons of wisdom experience. Currently, he's the lead pastor at a multi-site church in Ontario, Canada called Vital Point. He's married to his amazing wife, Desiree. They have 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, as well as 2 incredible granddaughters. I think I said all of that right. Sometimes the daughters-in-laws. Yes, I did it. Loves sports, active at his CrossFit gym, and super passionate about seeing churches thrive in small towns, which we're going to dive into. Ron, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for extending the invite to join you on the podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We're glad to have you. Hey, one thing that we start every episode with, we love to hear from our guests. There's obviously kind of the public bio, gives the highlights, but there's always stuff that doesn't make that all your friends and family would know about you. So what is that for you?
This is a great question. I would have been talking about, since you were talking about, fit by 40, I would have been talking about CrossFit, but CrossFitters just are willing to tell everybody that they're in CrossFit. So
That's true.
Second to sharing the gospel, they share their CrossFit.
That's right. I've got a whole pile of learnings from the CrossFit gym that relates to faith and church, but that's for another time. So I kind of chuckle about this question because it's common knowledge amongst my close friends and my family that if we're out with friends or family in an evening at someone's home, at about 10 o'clock, I start getting what everyone laughs about is Jimmy legs. And when I'm ready to go home, I look at my wife, Desiree, and I'm like, okay, we got to go. And then my friend, particularly Ray, he'll say, "Oh, Jimmy leg Ron's happening," and I'll have my coat on, my shoes on, I'll be standing at the door ready to go, and Desiree is still chatting away, and so gosh. That doesn't make your bio, but the people close to me know it's when I'm in that moment, I'm ready to go.
It's time, which I kind of feel like this might be a generalization, but I feel like a lot of couples, there's that disparaging, like, all right, it's time to go. And then the other is like, cool, I'm going to talk for another 45 minutes. And
yeah,
I remember as a kid sitting in the car with my dad while he just knew like mom's going to have another 10 conversations. So after church, let's just go sit in the car and wait. So,
and I mean, we've been married this year would be 34 years and we've still not developed any sort of like signal. Like we should probably develop a signal. Like
Yeah.
I'm leaving in 5 minutes with or without you. But anyway,
Yeah.
It sounds
I
like you
love
don't
it.
need a signal. Your signal is loud and clear. I've got my coat. I'm at the
Y-
door. I am ready.
you are exactly right. Yeah, it's like my
I
coat is
love
on, my shoes are on. And if I need to, I'll go out and start the car because if it's really super cold, I'll go out and start the car. And anyway, it's very
I
funny.
appreciate the honesty. Like, I'm kind of from the South where there's just all this, like, you have to be extra polite and like you can't be that honest. I'm like, no, no, let's be honest. I'm tired. I'm out. It was great,
it.
but goodbye. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
this would
like
be
it.
with this would be close friends, right, and family. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I'm at some party with people that I'm not super close with, I'll be a little bit more discreet about it. But
Yeah. I love
That's
it.
great. Well, Ron, I've got two questions. One's super easy.
Mhm.
How cold is it right now for you?
Oh, it's not very cold. We've had this strange winter. We've had a little bit of a dusting of snow. I mean, you could go out in a t-shirt today and yeah, or a hoodie. Yeah, it's weird. I was actually just talking with someone about this this morning. It's kind of this weird feeling of, hey, where is the snow? Where is the
Yeah.
super cold? And so it's we hope it comes, for a short window of time and then it can go.
Right.
But so it feels like we had winter, but it's not too bad.
Okay. Well, report back once winter comes. I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Watch me finish this conversation and go outside and it's like 40 below or something like that.
Right. That's I'll take the blame for that. I'm sorry in advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, the real question is
Mm.
Vital Point. I would really like to know more about the history of Vital Point, kind of the journey that you guys have been on as a church.
Yeah, it's it's definitely been a journey. It's we started in 2014. I was on staff at a fairly large church here in London, Ontario, and things were going really well. There's a few thousand people, and there was a church in our city that was a church plant, and they reached out and asked if I would consider being their pastor. And we really didn't feel like that was a timing for us to actually go and leave and be part of that and pastor that church. But what the guy that I work for, Rob, and we started talking about what would it look like if we brought 100 people from the existing church and merged with the church plant. And we're like, yeah, this makes sense. So in 2014, I pitched this to their leadership team. And to our surprise, this church plant with about 80, 90 people left after their pastor had left and gone back to the States, it was like, they're in. And we're like, oh, okay. So we're now merging a church. And so in 2014, we closed down that particular church for a few months, relaunched as the North Campus of that particular church that I was working for. And it was awesome. It was a lot of work merging two communities with different ideas, different thoughts, different vision, values, everything. It was just a lot of work, but fun. And in 2016, we started taking a hard look at how things were going, and it was growing financially. It was growing and getting stronger. And so Rob and I met weekly. In one of our meetings, we just said, hey, like maybe we should really talk about where we're going with this. And so in 2016, we both agreed that we were going to untether this from the existing community, the larger church. And so we did. In 2016, we went out on our own and got our own charitable status. And we had a bunch of different names in that point. I mean, it wasn't Vital Point. Where the new name emerged was when we realized that multisite was actually going to be something that was going to happen with the church. Mm-hmm. So about 2017, there was this group of people that were coming from about a half an hour north of London, 45 minutes north of London. They were coming down. There's like 25, 30 of them, 35, 40. It was growing. And they kept saying to me, let's plant a church in this small town close to where we live. And I'm like, no, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like mega churches do this. We are just a couple hundred people. We're just happy. And they ganged up on me and they prayed and prayed and prayed. And then God started working in my heart and revealing some things to me about my own particular gifting and the fivefold gifting, and Ephesians 4 started revealing some stuff to me about that. And we started realizing, oh my goodness, maybe God is in this. And in 2017, I believe it was, I did a leadership event for our church. We had a bunch of leaders in a room. And I was talking on 1 Thessalonians 1 verse 8, where Paul says, I can't go anywhere. Like your faith is ringing out. And so all of a sudden what happened was people started yelling out the little towns that they were from in the leadership meeting. And out of that, a woman pulled me aside and she grabbed me by the shoulders, and I literally felt like it was Jesus talking to me. And she said, this church is not just going to be one site. It's going to be multiple sites. And I'm like, are you, no, like this can't be happening. And so sure enough, we went down that journey. 2018, we did our first big reveal Christmas service in that town. 9 months later, 2019, we launched our second location, and it was exciting. It was like, this is amazing. And then, as we know, 2020 comes around, and that was a really challenging year. It started off, I was thinking about this on Sunday. It was 4 years ago on Sunday, our trailer was stolen. We're a portable church, right? So our trailer was stolen, but I had preached that morning on what if we didn't have a stage? What if we didn't have lights? What would Vital Point Church be?
Oh no.
Legit.
What?
You can't make this up. That night, our trailer was stolen. $100,000 of gear gone.
Oh my word.
And so that was the beginning of 2020, and then obviously all the things that happened there. But what happened in that season was I got before the community on video, and I said, we're not just going to survive this, we're going to thrive. And in Canada and Ontario in particular, we were shut down a long time, a year and a half, almost 2 years, it felt like. And so I said, we're not going to just survive this, we're going to thrive. Little did I know that out of that, we started doing these, they would allow us to have these small little gatherings. So we did what we called microsites. A lot of churches did this. And actually one of the microsites was 30 minutes north of our second location, and it started growing. And it was like, oh, okay, we better pay attention to this. And then once things started opening up, we started realizing, okay, we're going to launch our third site. It just made sense. And we did. We launched our third site coming out of COVID, and it was incredible. Like, we were so excited about what God was doing. But what happened in that season of all that's happening was we began studying Jesus, which is a good thing because we're a church. We were studying the life of Jesus, and we recognized that he spent the vast majority of his time in small towns. And so we started going, okay, is there a unique kingdom assignment for Vital Point Church to focus on small towns? Because hashtag Jesus loves small towns. It's kind of a bit of a joke around here. And so okay, God, what are you doing here? And then through the course of just examining a bunch of things structurally, we realized that we need to make some changes structurally within the context of the church to strengthen this idea that maybe God is kind of leading us to plant in small towns. And we've just launched our fourth location, another small town. So that's kind of a bit of the overarching. I mean, in the middle of COVID, we actually bought a building, which was where our flagship location is in Poplar Hill. It's a village, like literally there's 200 homes here. Wow. And the kind of the bit of the fun that we have is if a Tim Hortons it's our coffee in Canada. If there's a Tim Hortons in a town, we'll go, but our flagship town is so small, there's like one set of lights and that's it. Like there's nothing. Wow. And so that's our flagship location is in Poplar Hill. But that's kind of, there's a lot more in there obviously, but that's a bit of the brushstroke story.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing all that. It sounds like it was going to happen whether you wanted it to or not. Like God had a plan. He was like, listen, like, well, I will speak to you however you're going to listen, but this is going to happen.
Yeah, I had so that when we started thinking about Exeter, I mean, as a leader and pastor, you go into these moments of really seeking God. Like, we don't want to move unless you're with us, right? I can remember when I was driving somewhere, and I remember having this thought, and I believe it was God, or the wings the night before. I don't know. It was this sense I had that God was saying, if you don't do this, I'm actually going to give this to somebody else to do.
Wow.
Because I really had a sense that God was passionate, that the Father wanted this more than I did. And so there was a sense of going, okay, if I don't step into this vision for planting churches in small towns in this region is going to be assigned to somebody else. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I love winning. So it's like, no, this is not happening.
Right.
I am
Right.
going to step in and do this. So it was an important step for me. I had to sort of be broken personally because listen, I came out of a Willow Creek model church, thousands of people. I had it in my head that our church, Vital Point, eventually we call Vital Point, would be that.
Yeah.
And God had to really break that down in me. I mean, even our building in Poplar Hill, honestly, the auditorium seats 170. It's got stained glass windows. It's not what I thought God would have for us. So I had to really be broken personally to be able to lead into this myself.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, I wanted to take a quick minute and invite you to our next Healthy Church Summit coming up on February 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, before you hit that fast forward button, let me tell you about what's coming up. The Healthy Church Summit is a virtual event centered around how to manage and lead a healthy church and how the latest in church tech can help. Now, this upcoming summit is going to dive into making the most of your time, how you as a church leader can steward your time well. We'll also look at how can you improve your church's digital presence without taking more of your time. Now, we're excited to have with us at the summit Jenny Catron from the Foresight Group, Mark McDonald, a church communication and branding expert, Carrie Mayo, our own Director of Product Management, our CEO, Chris Bacon, and it will be hosted by some familiar faces, myself and Casey. Now, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we also have some awesome giveaways for those who register and attend. You could win an iPad Pro, $500 Amazon gift card, lunch for your team, free software, Beats headphones, a Kindle. It's going to be awesome. So do me a favor, click the link in the show notes and make sure you register and join us for the Healthy Church Summit coming up on February 15th, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you there. Well, I love, as you kind of walk through that, certainly there's here's what God's calling you to, but then at a certain point you say yes to that, and then you make some strategic choices, and you've made, like you just said, kind of a strategic choice to embrace starting in small towns and starting with small sites and going there. So as you've done that, what have you learned, and what are you learning that are some of the advantages to kind of embracing that direction?
Yeah, this is an awesome question, because in church planting world, we all know, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but it's super sexy to plant churches in cities.
Right.
Right.
And you're allowed to say that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You don't have the mute button. So when you think about church planting, we think about the big spaces where there's millions of people, blah, 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 blah. So for us, what we've recognized is there is a huge advantage to focusing on small towns. Think about towns that are 2,500, 3,000 people. Our largest one, Exeter, is 5,000 people in that town. It flows out of a bit of who we are as a church. So I would say, if someone were to ask me to describe Vital Point, I would say we're an attractional model with a missional heart. So there's still that bit of that Andy Stanley feel of, hey, you should come to my church, right? You should come to my church. Hey, you should check my church out. Not attractional in the full-blown entertainment style of attractional, but there's still that bring my friends to church feel. But there's also the missional aspect of it, where we believe that in small towns, you can actually become part of the fabric of that town. So it's not just, we're not planting services, we're planting churches in small towns that has an influence in the larger picture of what is happening in that particular space. So what we tell our site pastors, and we help them and train them on this, is that you're not just pastoring Vital Point. You're pastoring this town of 3,000 people. And I have seen this firsthand. My oldest son, David, pastors our Exeter location. So, and he's the one with our 2 grandkids. So we visit a lot because grandkids are incredible. I will be with him in town at the local Canadian Tire, and he'll have people approach him and say, hey, are you that pastor at that church, that new church? Can I ask you a few questions? And I literally just back away. and let him step into those moments.
Yeah.
So the advantages of casting a vision of reaching a town of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 is a little bit more creative in the imagination of the church, because you're not trying to, we're going to reach this city for Jesus and there's like 6 million people. It's like, I can't get my head around that. But in small town, you can actually talk like that. And you can legit have a possibility of making that happen in the sense of percentages and redemptive potential and that. The other really amazing thing about the advantage of focusing on small towns is that you can actually create a network of small town planting that overlaps, and you can cover an enormous region with smaller expressions of your church, which creates overlap of relational circles. So we can have someone who's in one of our sites in Clinton, which is an hour away from where I am, half an hour away from Exeter, and start a new site in Forest, which is our 4th location, and have people at all 3 sites go, I've got family that live in Forest. I've got my best friend that lives in Forest. I will bring them to services. I'm not going to make that my local, I'm not going to be part of that particular site, but I can actually bring my friends to this thing that's actually changed my life. Well, the church hasn't, Jesus has, but you know what I mean? Like there's this, so what we're looking at and praying about, and I have if you could see it, I have a map on my wall of where our sites are. And now we're praying about this network of church plants that will eventually cover this massive, massive region where you can have a massive impact for God's kingdom, right? So those advantages, I think the advantages, a couple other ones would be financially, it takes less money to launch a site in a small town.
Yeah.
Like you do not need $500,000, although we take $500,000. You don't need $500,000 to plant a site in a small town. You can do it for way, way less, and use kingdom resources to spread farther, which is amazing. But yeah, so those are some of the quick advantages. I think the other part of it, I mean, it's maybe a bit of a common sense, but needs to be mentioned, is that when you have people in one of your sites investing in a neighbor that's not churched, you don't have to drive 45 minutes to the city church, right? Yeah. So you can actually say, hey, we meet at the big red building at the center of town. Do you want to come with me? And it's far easier to, especially if you have an invite culture to a Sunday gathering, it's far easier to do it that way. And which is amazing. We see it all the time. It's absolutely incredible. So
I love that.
Gosh, based on a handful of things that you just said, I have some assumptions about this, but I'm curious what you think, how this model resonates with younger generations. That I think there's a recent study from Barna saying like this generation is one of the most spiritually open, but not in a traditional, we go to church every weekend because that's what we do. It's habit and discipline, and this is what we grew up doing, but very spiritually open, but in a very disconnected way. So I'm curious how this model is connecting, or maybe what your vision is for younger generations in a small church model, or it's not a small church, I'm sorry, small town model.
Yeah. Because some people would say Vital Point is a mega church deconstructed into smaller. It's right. I didn't come up with that. Someone in our church came to me one day and said that. So when you think about small towns where the vast majority of churches are closing and leaving a void, so the soil of sowing kingdom seeds is amazing and the harvest is amazing. What we're seeing is that the younger generations are actually connecting to the smaller expressions, because even though the quality, say, of the services are very good, like we don't, we strive for excellence. We don't, it's not cheesy. Oftentimes small town church, the assumption is it's cheesy. Sure. It's not. So you begin to bring a bit of that quote unquote big church feel to small town. Younger generations identify with it because it also creates an intimacy in the environment. And so there's a real connection for these people, because I believe that these younger generations are spiritually hungry. They're more looking for, they may not be necessarily looking for the big show. They're actually looking for that place that they can encounter Jesus, experience the work of the Holy Spirit within the context of community. And it's incredible to watch. The other piece that's exciting is that when you are clear on your vision, mission, and kingdom assignment, and you can lead from a place of boldness, younger generations get inspired by it. I can tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
There's a girl in our church, in our Poplar Hill site. She's 13. Her and her family were on a family vacation this summer. They got a car full of kids. They got 5 kids. Chloe's the oldest. They were driving through the town, and she legit says to her mom and dad, "Hey, I think I need to talk to Pastor Ron. I don't see any churches here. We should maybe consider planting one in this town." Think about what that does for younger generations that are part of a church that's not just interested in existing and serving itself, but has a very clear outward focus. Younger generations can be inspired by that. And on top of that, our children's ministry and our student ministries, our family ministry director is very aware and clear on this with her staff, is we are casting vision for that within the context of children's ministry, student ministry, knowing that God's going to raise up future site pastors and staff from within these contexts. So it attaches ourselves to this unbelievable vision, mission, and kingdom assignment that gives us clarity and boldness to even cast that to, because I don't think younger generations would even consider, can I even work in a church? Can I be in vocational ministry? But we have a structure that with the expansion, we're hoping to have 6 sites by 2027. Then that creates an incredible opportunity for some of these, especially the older teens, and the development of their leadership as well.
Yeah.
Well, you're leading right into where I'm curious, and it's almost like, we would call it like career development, but that strategic leadership development, especially with multi-site, as you guys are growing and as you have this vision for your 4th campus and then 5, 6, 7, how do you build that into your culture in developing the next community, the next site, and then the next leaders to take over that new site?
Well, we all know there's a leadership void in church world right now.
Yeah.
I mean, all the studies are revealing that, and we're feeling that.
Sure.
Like, we're feeling that, the crunch. Like, we're just not exactly sure. We're trusting and believing that God's going to bring those future leaders, and with either from within or from without.
Mm-hmm.
We've been toying with what we're calling a greenhouse residency program, where we would invite, say, older teens at a high school or young adults into a greenhouse residency where they would get a couple years of biblical online training, leadership training, and actually serve or work somewhere part-time within the context of the church, so we can develop them to be able to send them to other locations, other sites. I wish it was neat and tidy for us, but it's an area that we're really wrestling with. I mean, we have 13 staff now. We know that with up to 6 or 7 sites, we'll be 25, 26, 27 staff members. So the development of that is crucial. And I believe we're a bit behind on it. And it's something that we really need to continue working on. Thankfully, Site 4, God started stirring in a pastor's heart in a local church nearby. And I'm so grateful. Like, it was a total God thing, because we were panicking. We're 3 months away from launching full-blown weekly gatherings. The church is already launched in our 4th location, but God was gracious enough to provide someone. He just started this week. And it's a great question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but we're struggling with it.
I think it's an open question, right? And it's not, you said it right at the beginning. There's a huge shift in pastoral staffing. So it is kind of just a hot button topic a little bit. There was, I think, post-pandemic, like, what do we do? where is that development, and what it, like the role of a local pastor has just changed a lot lately. So I'm
I,
glad Campus 4 is covered. At least.
yeah, I would say this, and it might be, stepping into an area that people might wrestle with. I am not convinced the best way to develop future pastors is to send them away for 4 or 5 years to seminary.
Yeah.
Hear my words on this, guys. Yes, they need to be educated. Yes, we need to train, biblical training. I don't want people to think that I'm not for that. I am. But I believe that there's a better model of equipping and training future pastors without taking them out of the local church. That's how I feel. I got that deep conviction. But
no, I agree with you. I think that, yes, like, seminary, learning to know the word, study the word, teach the word, and everything beyond. I know it can go beyond that is important. But I agree, especially when it comes to leading, shepherding people. There's a lot that you need to learn by doing alongside of somebody who can watch you do and be along with you. And then you can step back and have those conversations around what went well, what didn't, how do I grow in this? I think it's a way of learning some of those things, maybe without making as many mistakes, as if it's like, hey, I went here for 4 years, got an education, went across the country and just kind of found myself in this church and figure it out,
And our particular model, I mean, the teaching in our sites is primarily video.
Okay.
Right. So it's video teaching. So our site pastors are freed up to pastor, to lead, to equip, to grow the serving teams and expand that way. Because I preach live in Poplar Hill where I'm located, but the other sites are all video. So the site pastors don't have to worry about being a communicator or teacher. Now they have to embody, when we do the close of the service, they have to embody what was done in the service, what was taught, and they all have the scripts beforehand and know where it's going. But then they become the actual pastoral moment at the end of a service. Yeah. So I'm just the face on the screen. The pastor is actually going for the heart of the individual. So
well, you'd mentioned earlier when we were talking a little bit about kind of the younger generation, and you said one of the things that really resonates is that clarity of vision. And one of the things that I appreciate about even just hearing kind of what God's doing there, hearing your heart, is kind of how you've arrived at that clarity of vision. So how did you get that? Because I think I do think that that's really powerful, and I don't know if that's always prevalent among church leaders and pastors. So kind of what was that process like? And, do you have any advice for others who want that but may not be there yet?
Yeah. This is great because you guys talked to Chris Vacher, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Chris and I are friends. So a few years ago, he came to visit me here at Vital Point, and he was talking about going out and doing what he's doing now. So I took him out for lunch, and so I read him what I thought was this inspiring vision statement. And he literally looks at me, he goes, "Yeah, that's boring." And I still bought lunch. I still paid for his lunch, just so we're clear.
You're gracious.
I was gracious. I should have made him pay. And I'm like, what? And I can't even remember what it was. It was like a safe place to explore and grow in life and faith or something like that. And explore and grow were always the words that I loved about Vital Point Church, and I wasn't ready to sacrifice those. But he said, no, you need to really dig in and take a hard look at the church, what God is doing, and come up with a better clarity of a vision statement that will inspire people. And I'm like, this is not inspiring? Like, I like this. And he's like, no. So anyway, we ended up doing the work. Literally the work. We had to spend time just examining every part. I mean, I think for us in that season of 2020, 2021, and 2022, we just started pulling everything apart and saying, okay, God, what is it that you have done here? I mean, the mission you can't mess with. Jesus was very clear on the mission. But what is the vision statement that's going to help us fulfill the mission? And we brought Chris on and we started working with him. He started working with us. We started looking at every aspect of the church, and we just landed on this idea of being a multi-site church that reaches thousands of people who are exploring and growing their knowledge of Jesus and commitment to his church.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, okay, this is great. And most people would be able to tell you parts of it, which is great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that is it's not easy. I think that's why it's not something that's always common, but I do appreciate too, even the willingness to say, hey, let's get a little bit outside of ourselves to hear from somebody who can say, hey, that sounds great in your head, but here's how it sounds, to the outside world. And that feedback certainly must have been helpful kind of in getting that clarity and going through that process.
Scott, it's hard. I mean, we as church leaders, I mean, there's times where there's a certain amount of pride and ego, and it stunned me when he said it, because I was super excited about it. But if I'm really committed to understanding that I'm given the responsibility to pastor this church, not my church, so it's Christ's body. So I've got to be able to step back and say, I got to set it all aside, honestly, and just say, okay, God, if this is true and you're going to use this outside voice, and I think if I were to encourage any leader that's struggling with their vision, is to embrace the outside voices that you trust. Chris and I have a relationship, so I could trust him. And really step back and say, and hold everything with an open hand. And if you're clenching too tightly to what you think the vision should be, then it's possible that you're going to miss out on the beauty of how God wants to reshape the uniqueness of that vision. Because honestly, out of the vision statement, we discover what our kingdom assignment is.
Yeah.
And our kingdom assignment was described by the multi-site planting in small towns, because what came out of all this process was a clarity of knowing that God actually gives unique assignments. It's like puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Each church has a puzzle piece of the broader kingdom, and the unity of the body of Christ can happen when each church begins to discover their kingdom assignment and how it fits together. The church, local churches around us are not going to express the same way we do, but the unity can be, what's your kingdom assignment? How can we support you? Because in small towns, if churches are okay with this, and they get threatened by this, but if they can actually take a breath, drop their shoulders a little bit, and realize, hey, even in a small town, we can work through unity. Oftentimes our unity, we think, oh, let's just have a big worship gathering and we'll be unified together. It's like, no, I'm not interested in that. I'd rather figure out what our kingdom assignment is. So when you're clear in your mission, vision, I believe that your kingdom assignment, like Jesus says this, and we got to get a Bible verse in because we're a church thing. John 17, I think it's beginning of John 17. I think Jesus says to the Father, I have glorified you on earth. I have done everything I've accomplished everything that you've assigned to me. Right? I probably just butchered that, but anyway.
No, you're good.
You kind of get the feel of it, right? It's like, okay, Jesus was clear in his kingdom assignment. How much more should we as a church be clear in our kingdom assignment?
Yeah.
If Jesus has walked through small towns, laid down footprints for us, he can walk down Main Street, turn and look at us and say, hey, will you follow me? I've been here. I'm present here. I want my body to be here. How exciting is that? Right? And so, but it's hard work. Like, guys, it is not easy.
Yeah.
It is so hard.
Yeah. I'm sure you're saying along the way, then you're saying certainly a lot of yeses, but also a lot of nos for, hey, why don't we do this? Or this is a great idea. Or I saw this, or, but if you don't have that, then, you're still going to have a vision and a culture. It's just going to happen by accident rather than intentionally.
Yes.
You said one thing that,
sorry.
I'm so sorry. You said one thing that was really interesting, Ron. You said your vision statement, and then you said some of our people might be able to say parts of that. I think that's really interesting that and I'm sure your leaders and your growing staff, they know what is your guiding force. Why do we exist in this community? whether or not every single person that steps foot into any of your locations, whether or not they can recite it, that's going to bleed out through your leadership, through the culture that you are protecting. And kind of by proxy, people will be that, whether or not they can recite it, because you're living it. You know exactly why you exist, which, to Scott's point, you know why you don't exist. And
That's
I
right.
think that's really, really important.
I'll have people contact me out of the blue from other sites. Hey, Ron, have you considered this town?
Yeah.
I've been journaling, praying about that town.
Mm.
And even though they can probably articulate parts of the vision statement, they have picked up who we are.
Exactly.
I had a long conversation with yesterday on the phone with someone from our Exeter location. She's super excited about a town where she's got family. And she said, maybe God's leading us there. So there's elements of understanding that people who are part of Vital Point Church just know, okay, when I stand up and I can say, hey, guess what? Site 5 is in this town. They all start clapping and cheering and giving. It's amazing. It's incredible to be part of.
I love it.
I love that.
Well, one of the things, just kind of as we wrap up, one of the things we ask all of our guests, again, our goal on this podcast is conversations that empower healthy churches. So one of the things we'd like to hear from everyone on this show, in your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. I mean, it could go in so many different directions, right? Well, and it's a praying church. It's a Bible-based church. It's like, okay, let's just get those out of the way and understand, yes, we agree with that.
Yeah.
For me personally, for a healthy church, I have a conviction that the leadership team, whether it's a pastor or youth pastor or whatever, they have to have clarity on who God has called them to be. Right? Think about Joshua. He gets great clarity from God. I am now giving you the mantle of leadership. Once Joshua was given that, he went from being the assistant to Moses to being now the leader of God's people. When Joshua got super clear on who God had called him to be, he was able to lead with boldness.
Yeah.
And I believe that when a leader is clear on who God has called them to be, they lead from a place of boldness. High level of trust happens within the body. Think about Joshua sending, I think Joshua 3, where, he sends out the word. We're getting ready to move. Consecrate yourselves. Prepare, for God is going to do something tomorrow. And I have this deep conviction that if the leadership does not understand who they are, like in 2017, when I began to realize out of the APEST that I was actually high score apostolic, I sat on my couch and I cried. I just realized all these years of this sense that I had, and I was in a second chair position in the particular church that I was part of, and never had the full green light to express the apostolic wiring. I legit broke because I realized this is what God has called me to, and I can be an entrepreneur for God's kingdom. And then I got clarity on that, which gives me clarity to stand in front of our community and cast a vision that's massive, and people sacrificially give to it. And a high level of trust and obedience. So that's probably a bit longer than what you wanted, but that's kind of what I feel.
No, that's great. And so appreciate you not only sharing that, but obviously just sharing the journey you've been on, what you've learned, like where you all are at, and the way that you've embraced kind of the unique calling that God has for you. And also the really the beauty of it in seeing, which is true of anything God's calling us to, but there's unique things that are really special about it. And so thank you so much for sharing that. We are going to jump into what we call our final 5. This is a little more rapid fire coming at you. And so the first one is this, which as a pastor, I feel like you probably have more than one, but what's one book you'd recommend to church leaders?
Yeah, I got dialed right into Dr. Rob Reimer's books, and particularly the one, Spiritual Authority. That book really began to reshape how I think about my leadership role and quote unquote the authority that God has. I think sometimes God's made a mistake, but uh, you know, that spiritual authority is not just because of a position or experience. It's because we carry the presence of God into our leadership. And so that spiritual authority, his book on spiritual authority was powerful. It was just amazing. So
it's awesome. We'll make sure to link to that for sure.
All right, Ron, number 2. What is the last thing that you listened to?
Oh, the last thing. Oh, this is okay.
Embrace it.
I know.
Guilty pleasure. Just let it out.
Okay. So I really am into the Sean Ryan show on podcast. He's an ex Navy SEAL guy, I think he is, or something. He has these long form podcasts and he interviews soldiers, and politically he's a little bit interesting, but I think sometimes listening to things that we're not accustomed to listening to helps us shape who we are. But anyway, I've been Sean Ryan show.
Yeah.
It's great. I can't believe I just admitted this on a podcast.
Hey, all right. What about this? What is your favorite piece of technology? And you can't say your phone. That's the only rule for this.
Oh,
I know.
Are you serious?
Was that what you were going to say?
I would say my phone. Okay. I have an iPad Pro that I just love it. I mean, I use it for writing. I use it for preaching from. I love the pencil. It's just epic. I can hack and slash up my talks when I'm giving them on Sunday, and I don't like that, and I can, so I love that.
Do you have the film that goes on the screen that makes it feel like real paper?
No, I
keep
don't.
seeing ads for this. Like my algorithm is pushing it to me, and I'm curious.
That's
now that we've talked about it out loud, it's going to be on my algorithm now. But,
I know. Shoot, I'm sorry. I just
we should probably. I should look into it.
Sorry. All right. What is a quote or piece of wisdom, some advice that has just really stuck with you throughout the years?
Yeah. When I was in Bible college in the, late 80s, early 90s, my pastoral class, which is so funny now, I look back at it. I don't remember a thing from the class, but I remember this one thing. It was a pastor that actually taught the class. He said, never lose the servant heart as a pastor. If there's an event at your church, you're the one up pouring the coffee. You're the one cleaning plates. You're the one collecting garbage. That is over 30 years of ministry that has stuck with me. It didn't matter if I was at our previous church was 3,000 people. I would still do that. I would still, even today, with the staff, I'll grab their plates and wash them for them. And I think I think pastors need to put the towel over their arms, and that stuck with me. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, it is. All right. Last one. One thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders.
One thing, eh?
Yeah.
I just revealed that I'm Canadian because I said A.
You said a boot a couple times too.
Oh.
So yeah.
That was a funny Southerner trying to quote a Canadian. I just love observing how that went down.
I had to emphasize it a lot.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Because of the social media world that we live in, I really do believe that we as church leaders, doesn't matter if you're new, middle, or near the end, we need to stop comparing ourselves to what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And I think the comparison game is destroying a lot of what God's trying to do in and through you as a leader. I know for me, I wrestle with it, guys. I give this as a thought for leaders, but it's for me as well. I can get so trapped in, oh man, Craig Rochelle just dropped this amazing talk and look what they're doing, or and I think sometimes it just doesn't do us well as church leaders. And it keeps us from doing what God has called us to do if we continue to compare ourselves. So I think a lot of that, like I say, I'm talking to myself on this one. So
Yeah, no, that is, I think, really helpful and needed. And we honestly, we all need to, embrace that. And so certainly appreciate you sharing that. Ron, where can people just connect with you or kind of hear more about what's going on at the church? Could you give them some direction on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm boring on social media. So honestly, I mean, my Instagram is Ron Baker 129, I think. But check out the Vital Point Church's Instagram, Facebook. Although I just read some stuff that we should probably be on TikTok, so I've sent some stuff to our media team saying, "Hey, we should consider TikTok because the Gen Zs are on it."
There you go.
So I think for us as a church, just check out Vital Point. I don't know if there's many churches named Vital Point Church, so we won't be hard to find.
Yeah, we'll link to that, your website, certainly all of that. And just
Yeah.
so appreciate you taking the time to, to share what you have learned, what you're learning, where you're going, what God's doing in you at the church. It's really, really cool. And I think that it's been really helpful for our audience of church leaders. And we want to thank you, our audience of church leaders, for being here, for listening, for watching, for tuning in. Like I said, our goal is to empower healthy churches through these conversations. And so we really hope that we've helped with that even just a little bit. And if we have, would encourage you to leave a review, to subscribe, maybe to share this with somebody who might find it helpful. That helps us get these conversations into more people's ears. So we appreciate that. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.